History remembers the winners. It remembers the aircraft that dropped the bombs, the planes that filled the skies with fire, the machines that arrived after the world had already changed. But history has a bad habit of forgetting the aircraft that caused that change. Before the B-17, before the B-29, before the doctrine of strategic bombing reshaped entire continents, there was an aircraft so advanced, so disruptive, that it terrified military planners, not because it failed, but because it worked too well. An aircraft that flew faster than the fighters meant to stop it. An aircraft that proved the future of war would belong to speed, altitude, and metal, not canvas and wires. Its name was the B-9 bomber, and almost no one talks about it. The world before the B-9. To understand why the B-9 mattered, you have to understand the world it flew into. In the early 1930s, military aviation was still trapped in the past. Most bombers were slow fabric-covered biplanes. They relied on defensive machine guns, not speed. They flew low, lumbering through the sky like airborne wagons. Fighters were king. Bombers were expected to be escorted, protected, babysat. The idea that a bomber could defend itself simply by being faster was considered fantasy. Air doctrine was conservative. Generals believed wars would be decided by ground armies, not by aircraft thousands of feet above them. And then Boeing quietly rolled something out of a hangar in 1931, birth of a radical idea. The aircraft was originally called the Boeing Model 214. The U.S. Army would later designate it the B-9. At first glance, it didn't look like anything else in service. No external struts, no fabric skin, no biplane wings. Instead, it was sleek, all metal, and monoplane. A design philosophy years ahead of its time. Its skin was aluminum. Its wings were cantilevered. Its engines were enclosed in streamlined nacelles. To pilots used to flying fragile wire-braced aircraft, the B-9 looked almost alien, but the real shock came when it took to the air. The moment everything changed. During early test flights, the B-9 stunned observers. It wasn't just faster than other bombers. It was faster than frontline fighter aircraft. Fighter pilots attempting mock interceptions couldn't catch it. They climbed too slowly. They arrived too late. For the first time, bomber had proven something revolutionary. Speed could be armor. This single realization would reshape air warfare for the rest of the century. Terrified traditional thinking. The B-9 challenged nearly every belief military aviation held. If bombers could outrun fighters, then escort fighters weren't always necessary. If bombers could strike deep and fast, then enemy cities, factories, and rail lines were suddenly vulnerable. This wasn't just a new airplane. It was a new philosophy of war. Air power advocates saw the implications instantly. Traditionalists felt threatened, and institutions under threat rarely react kindly. Politics, budgets, and fear. Despite its performance, the B-9 faced powerful enemies, not in the sky but on the ground. It was expensive. It required new manufacturing techniques. It demanded pilots trained for higher speeds and altitudes. Worst of all, it made existing aircraft and the people who championed them look obsolete. Military procurement is not just about performance. It is about comfort, tradition, and control. The B-9 was too far ahead. A bomber that arrived too early. Only 7 B-9 aircraft were built. 7. Not because it failed, but because it proved a future the world wasn't ready to fully embrace. The aircraft entered limited service, where it continued to embarrass fighters and outperform expectations. But the Great Depression tightened budgets. Conservatism returned. Risk was avoided. And quietly, the program ended. The B-9 was shelved. The irony of forgetting. Here is the cruel irony. The B-9 was forgotten, but everything it proved lived on. Its design philosophy directly influenced later bombers. The idea of fast, high-altitude, all-metal bombers became the foundation of strategic air power. The B-17 Flying Fortress, the B-24 Liberator, the B-29 Super Fortress. None of them would exist in the same form without the lessons learned from the B-9. The shadow it cast over World War II. When World War II erupted, nations raced to build bombers that matched the ideas the B-9 had proven years earlier. Speed, altitude, range, metal construction. The B-9 never dropped bombs in anger, but its influence dropped bombs on entire continents. Factories burned, cities fell silent. Wars were shortened and intensified, and still the B-9 remained a footnote, Why history ignored it. History prefers heroes that arrive at the moment of crisis. The B-9 arrived before the world was burning. It didn't fight a famous battle. It didn't carry a legendary crew. It didn't have propaganda posters or wartime footage. It simply proved the future and stepped aside. The lesson we keep relearning. The B-9 story is not just about aviation. It's about innovation, about how the most important ideas are often ignored. Not because they are wrong, but because they are early. The world rarely celebrates the first step. It celebrates the last one. When the B-9 refused to die, the fire should have killed it. Any other bomber of that era would have already been spiraling toward the earth, wings tearing apart, fabric burning away, control cables snapping like threads. But the B-9 didn't behave like any other aircraft. Flames wrapped around one engine, white-hot against the black sky. Thick smoke streamed behind it, painting a long scar across the clouds. From the ground, observers believed they were watching the last moments of an experimental failure. They were wrong. Inside the cockpit, the aircraft was shaking, not screaming. The metal skin held. The wing spars absorbed stress no one believed they could survive. This was the moment Boeing engineers had argued about in meeting rooms. The moment traditionalists said would never matter, and yet here it was. The pilot didn't dive. He didn't panic. He pushed the nose forward when not down forward, trading altitude for speed. And that decision revealed the B-9's final secret. Speed over survival. The aircraft accelerated. Even with one engine burning, the B-9 surged ahead, faster than expected, faster than predicted, faster than anything chasing it. Below and behind, pursuit fighters struggled to climb. Their open cockpits rattled. Their engines screamed. Their wings vibrated under stress they were never designed to endure. The burning bomber was still outrunning them. This was the moment the old world ended. For decades, air combat theory said damage meant death, that a bomber hit by fire was already lost, that survival depended on escort formation and luck. But the B-9 rewrote that rule in smoke and flame. It proved that structural strength and speed could buy time. Time to escape, time to survive, time to return. When generals stopped talking. After the aircraft landed, scorched, blackened, but intact, something changed. No celebration followed. No headlines. No announcements. Instead, there was silence. Senior officers studied photographs in closed rooms. Engineers reviewed damage reports with quiet intensity. Fighter advocates avoided eye contact. Bomber doctrine suddenly felt unstable. Because if this aircraft could survive fire at speed, if it could outrun interception even while damaged, then everything they believed about air defense was wrong, and wrong beliefs are dangerous. The fear. No one admitted. The B-9 frightened people for a reason no report would ever admit. It removed control. If bombers could fly faster than fighters, if they didn't need escorts, if they could survive damage and escape, then airspace itself was no longer safe. Borders meant less. Defenses meant less. Warnings came too late. The B-9 wasn't just a machine. It was a warning from the future. Why it had to disappear. Officially, the program ended due to budget constraints and changing priorities. Unofficially, the aircraft asked questions the world wasn't ready to answer. What happens when offense outpaces defense? What happens when speed beats interception? What happens when war arrives before you can stop it? So the B-9 was quietly removed from the spotlight, not destroyed, not condemned, just forgotten. The ghost in every bomber that came after. Years later, when the skies over Europe filled with four-engine bombers, no one spoke the B-9's name, but it was there. In the smooth aluminum skins, in the emphasis on speed and altitude, in the belief that bombers could reach targets once thought untouchable. Every strategic bomber that followed carried its DNA, but none carried its credit. History doesn't always erase what fails. Sometimes, it erases what arrives too early. The B-9 bomber didn't fall in battle. It didn't vanish in flames over enemy territory, unforgotten by history itself. The bomber history left behind. History doesn't always erase what fails. Sometimes, it erases what arrives too early. The B-9 bomber didn't fall in battle. It didn't vanish in flames over enemy territory. It simply proved a future no one was ready to accept, and then stepped out of sight. While later bombers became legends, the B-9 became a shadow. Yet every aluminum wing that followed, every bomber that flew faster, higher, and farther, carried a piece of its forgotten legacy. The world remembers the aircraft that ended wars, but it rarely remembers the aircraft that taught the world how wars would be fought. The B-9 never needed applause. It already changed everything. And even today, when bombers cut silently through the sky, the echo of the B-9 still flies with them, unseen, unspoken, unforgotten by history itself.